Okay, I decided to draw this out so that it'd be easier for you to follow what I'm doing. So let's imagine that this is one of the 2x2 floor matting foam pieces. We're going to do 1/2 of the shoulder pads. So we'll basically take one of these and we'll go about halfway down and we'll split it. So we're looking at about 1x2. So about halfway through here, you're going to split that. I think they actually measure about 22 inches, so about 11 inches high. And you're going to do that, and that's going to be approximately the size of those shoulder pads from the center of your neck out to the end. And maybe you don't want them 22 inches wide. You'll have to determine that based off of the person that's going to be wearing these, because otherwise this is going to be a total of 44 inches. So if you don't need them that wide, do a measurement from shoulder to shoulder, and then maybe add 4 to 6 inches addition on either side, however further you want them to stick out. So then you'll want to go ahead and design them to come on down however you want it. And you might do a little bit of a shape and then bring them down. And yeah, if the person is small enough, you might be able to get a little bit of that curve down here at the bottom and get that going. However, if you glue, and I'm doing this 2 separate instead of just doing one, and just having this curve up here into the next one, even though you do want to do a little bit of a curve up here. So you might want to do a little bit of a curve and then come into this. But the reason that I want to do this as 2 separate is because if you just do it as one, the shoulder pad would be completely straight across the top. But you do it 2 separate so that you put a little bit of a curve here, just ever so slightly. Maybe if this is flush here, all the way at this end, if you go all the way to the very end, you might have this change maybe an inch, 2 inches at most, and just have it slightly angle all the way there. That'll give a slight angle when you glue them back together. If you angle that too much, it'll curve way too much when you glue them back together. But if it's not enough, then you can trim it down and then try again. And this is where you would end up using the contact cement to do it. So you'll do that, and then you'll end up repeating this 4 times. You'll get the pattern that you like here. Then you'll repeat the same image onto this piece, and then you'll do this exact same thing on a whole nother floor matting foam piece. Once you have those 4 pieces, you can go ahead and possibly glue them together at that point, or you can decide how big of a head. You'll want to make sure that the hole for your head is large enough for you to fit your head through, but have it comfortably, because you're going to end up having pads for it. You don't want to have it a perfect circle here, because you'll need more of an opening on the front area than you will on the back. So you'll determine, like, okay, the back will only need this much, where the front will have that circle come all the way down. And so you'll do that, and then you'll do that the same opposite on the other side. And then, as far as to get the ridges going across the shoulders, once the shoulders get your curve going, so once the shoulders are curved and everything, in order to get the ridges over it. So say this is your actual shoulder being curved over. Say this foam is your shoulder curved over. You would normally get the tri-foam pieces from Hobby Lobby or Michael's, if they still have it, and you would simply run those across the shoulders. One toward the edge of the shoulders, probably 2 different paths. Probably split it up in thirds and run it across. Let me put a piece here. Let's just assume that this was it, and you just put a piece wrapping around You could even use this stuff, but I like to try because it'll give you a distinct point there. You could very well just trim this off and just cut it on an angle and then glue it there, because this will all be covered with fabric as well. So that's one way to save on additional money, because you're going to end up having these anyway. So you can end up cutting this on an angle when you cut off all these extra pieces, and you can just wrap this around the edge and just glue it on and just have it sticking up around the edge, around the neck area, and then one further down the shoulder, and it'll stick up. And so on the actual picture, you would have that sticking up, and you'd put one that goes kind of here, and it would stick up. And then you would put another one around here, and it would stick up. And then you would use the upholstery foam to kind of put a donut of some sort around the whole neck area. You could also end up using pipe insulation foam or something of that nature, just to keep a nice rounded circle here. Once that is all made to go all the way around, give you a nice donut, make sure that hole is still definitely big enough for you to fit your head through there nice and comfortably. So this hole that's left behind has got to be a lot larger than your head, basically, so that it just freely slides through. But you want to be able to work with a wider neckline here. But this is all still just going to be framework. Now you're going to take the last thing, if for whatever reason the shoulder pads do not look sturdy enough or do not look large enough, I took one other piece of because we've only used 2 of these so far, I took another piece of this, so another one of these squares, basically, and I cut probably a fourth of one of those squares, and then I just kind of cut a U shape out of it. And I took that U shape and I put it underneath this front, just to kind of give an extra U on the front of here, to give more body to the front of this, because we're just going to wrap all of this with extra cloth so that the shoulder pads have more body and the cloth has more to stick to. Also, since you're going to put a cape on here, you're going to want to add more weight to the front of these shoulder pads to keep this from pulling up and jamming in the neck. So you may need to add some sort of weight to the front of this. My newest set, I actually put a block of wood underneath all of this padding, just to put extra weight to offset the weight of the cape. So you'll want to think of something to weight this down in the front. So then after that, and all of this stuff so far is glued together with contact cement. So the rest of this stuff from this point on is going to be glued down with hot glue. This is where I took a piece of the t-shirt material, cut it oversized, that would clearly cover all of the shoulder pads, and I just cut an X in the center right where the head was going to be, and I just laid it over everything, and then I put a little hot glue around the neck and just started tucking around the neck. Put a little hot glue around the edges of this and just tucked it in around there so it would get that. But then I let all the material kind of free flow around here, but I put hot glue around the peaks where I wanted those to stand out. And then I just kind of tucked it in, and then I just kind of bundled up the cloth in the front. But I did put a little bit of glue here so that I knew that it would lay in layers here. But then around the edges, all the way around, I tucked it underneath, and then I hot glued it underneath all the way around. I did that on the front and the back. I also did that, and then I made little cups. I'm not going into the details of the cups, but they kind of were like another section just like this. Let's say this was a shoulder pad. I cut out a shoulder pad, and the pattern on a shoulder pad is usually something that looks kind of like this. This is actually, that's probably a good shoulder pad pattern. You could play around with this pattern and cut it out of foam, cut it out of paper, cut this chunk out here, cut this chunk out here, have a general design like that, glue this down, and then when you glue these two triangles together, that's actually gonna round this thing and it'll wrap around like a half moon, and you can make that a shoulder pad. What I did was underneath, right where my shoulders would sit on either side, I glued that up into the shoulders to hold the framework, to make sure that these shoulder pads would stay sturdy, number one. Number two, if you look at the actual shoulder pads, the cape really wraps around the shoulder pads more than going all the way to the edge of here. They do go to the edge, but it doesn't, the cape doesn't drop down from here. The cape actually kind of goes in on an angle, then it goes to those shoulder pads, and that's where it drops down. So you'll, when you add the cape and glue it onto the shoulder from the back, so if we're looking at the back of the shoulders, and you've got the back of your shoulders, and you're about to put on the cape, you've got these little shoulder pads. Let's just say shoulder pads are under here, shoulder pads are under here. Bad quick drawing. But you're about to glue on the cape, you're gluing the cape all the way around the edges. You'll glue it all the way around underneath all of the cloth that we already have here. Let that cloth kind of hang over the edge of everything to kind of hide the fact that you're gluing things. But then you pull it kind of taut to the shoulders, and then it all gets glued across here, and then this is where your cape actually drops straight down. You let it drop straight down at this point. You don't drop it straight down at the edge of your cape. You drop it straight down at the shoulders. So hopefully this makes sense to you. I'm going to cut this up and I'm going to send it to you, and let me know what you think about it. If need be, I can make a mini version of these. I'll make it for one of my figures up there. I can make some shoulder pads for Hulk or something like that, and we can do it live or something. Talk to you later. Thanks.